Good morning, Amazon. Flash briefing. Amazon. Flash briefing.
Jamie, here's your flash briefing. In NPR News.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Korva Coleman. Ukrainians are keeping a wary eye on this week's meetings between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Xi arrived at the Kremlin last hour. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports most Ukrainians believe nothing can come of Xi's talks with Putin because they say Ukraine must win on the battlefield for there to be real peace.
The Donbas town of Slavyansk is about 30 miles west of Bakhmut, where fighting is constant and heavy. People here know that if Bakhmut falls, Slavyansk could be next. Hello. Mayor Vadim Lyakh has stayed here throughout the war and all the shelling. He says this war has been going on for 9 years, and the only way to end it for good is with the complete victory of Ukraine, the capitulation of Russia, and Russian withdrawal from all Ukrainian territories. That's the only way, he says, to keep another generation of Ukrainians.
Look at all the peace deals they could have went down.
Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Slavyansk.
Members of France's parliament are ready to hold a no-confidence vote in the government of President Emmanuel Macron. Some French lawmakers are furious over a legislative move that Macron used last week. He employed a rarely used constitutional power to pass legislation that increases the retirement age in France from 62 to 64. Unions and their supporters have fiercely opposed the change. Some unions have been on strike in France for days. Stocks opened mixed this morning as investors continue to keep a wary eye on the banking industry. NPR's Scott Horsley reports the Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped about 380 points in early trading.
After the shotgun sale of troubled Swiss bank Credit Suisse to UBS, banking authorities in the U.S. are looking to unload two failed regional institutions. The FDIC said this morning it's extending the auction for assets of Silicon Valley Bank, which collapsed earlier this month. Deposits and some loans of Signature Bank are being sold to Flagstar Bank in New York. Forecasters are divided over how the banking crunch will affect Wednesday's interest rate decision by the Federal Reserve. Most expect the Fed to raise its benchmark rate by a quarter percentage point. But some argue the Fed should leave rates alone for now to give nervous bankers and their customers a breather. Concern about possible economic fallout from the banking turmoil has pushed oil prices to a 15-month low. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
Separately, the U.S. Federal Reserve is working with 5 other central banks to keep U.S. dollars flowing through the global financial system.
Okay,
The move comes
twice
after
now
the
at the
rescue
end
the
of the month.
takeovers of Credit Suisse Bank and 3
Beginning of the
other
month, okay,
U.S.
just
banks.
back it up a
The
little so we can see
transaction
it's
will
lower
make
than
sure
last
the
month.
trusted U.S. dollar
By the end
is
of the
more
month,
readily available
double it.
on a daily basis. Stocks remain mixed on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 356 points, well over 1%. The Nasdaq is down more than 17 points. You're listening to NPR News. In South Africa, at least 87 people have been arrested amid anti-government protests by the opposition Economic Freedom Fighters Party, or the EFF. Kate Bartlett reports from Johannesburg that despite the party's threats of a national shutdown, today's protests have not been heavily attended.
South Africa's radical minority party leader, Julius Malema, called for the national shutdown, saying President Cyril Ramaphosa should resign as the country reels from a protracted energy crisis.
Are they really
Ramaphosa acknowledged in
or are
a
they just
statement
preaching
South
freedom?
Africans have the right to peaceful protest, but he warned against violence or damage to property. Police said they'd confiscated over 2,000 tires slashed at key locations. It's common during unrest in South Africa for people to create roadblocks with burning tires. In July 2021, South Africa saw some of the worst violence of the post-apartheid era, when protests resulted in widespread looting and the deaths of more than 300 people. For NPR News, I'm Kate Bartlett in Johannesburg.
The United Nations agency that is tracking climate change is releasing a major report today. Hundreds of climate scientists have collaborated to warn the Earth is running out of time to reduce global warming. The agency has released prior reports on the need for rapid cuts in fossil fuel use and warnings about how much of humanity is at risk. Today's major report will be discussed at a global climate conference It's set for the end of this year
Look up the
in
map of
United Arab
dissolved
Emirates.
solids in your water,
I'm Corva Coleman, NPR
Yeah, it's pretty
News
rough.
in Washington.
depending on where you live.
It's Guy Raz here. On the Wisdom from the Top
Amazon.
podcast, I talked to
Skip.
In weather. Currently, in Seattle, it's 46 degrees Fahrenheit with showers. Today, you can expect rainy weather with a high of 51 degrees and a low of 43 degrees. From NASA. New technology is a key to helping NASA advance its long-term exploration goals for the benefit of all. To support its efforts, the agency announced Thursday it will create 2 new institutes to develop technology in critical areas for engineering and climate research. NASA has issued $50 million in awards to 14 organizations to develop manufacturing processes and advanced composite materials for aircraft structures. These green technologies hold the potential to help reduce aviation carbon emissions. NASA is awarding more than $3.8 million to 21 museums, science centers, and other informal education institutions for projects designed to bring the excitement of space science to communities across the nation and broaden student participation in STEM, science,
Right
technology, engineering, and mathematics.
Right arm. Okay.
NASA has another cargo shipment en route to the International Space Station following a successful Falcon 9 launch of SpaceX's 27th resupply mission for the agency. NASA and Axiom Space have signed a mission order for the 3rd private astronaut mission to the International Space Station, targeted to launch no earlier than November 2023 from the agency's NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
All right.
That's all for your
Me
flash
too.
briefing.
Okay. Cool. Have a great day. Peace, love. Have a wonderful week.